Hey everybody, Rich here, Rich's Custom Marine and Auto. In this one we're going to be working on this 2019 F-150. This truck has the 5.0 in it. See, I've already started. Customer complaint on this is that with the auto stop start, after the vehicle's driven for a little while, he'll come to a stop, apply the brake, and then of course it shuts the engine off. And when he goes to touch the accelerator pedal, of course the engine should crank right up and go. Sometimes it won't crank over. Usually only happens again when it's warm. Now when I brought it to my shop, cold, it cranks over great, which I've already got the battery out as you guys can see, so I can't demonstrate that, but it cranks over just fine. My initial thought on this was that the starter was getting worn out and it heat soaks. It is right up next to the exhaust pipe, which I'll show you here in just a second. But I kind of suspect the starter on this. But I charged the battery. There's my battery charger up there. I charged the battery up, and I want to show you what the battery shows. Yeah, I don't know how well that's showing on there. There we go. 44% capacity replace. So, and you can see it says, you might be able to see on there, charge percentage is 98%, which is obviously because we just took it off the charger. But so the battery's no good for sure, so we'll look into getting another one of those. On these rigs, it's a AGM, absorbent gas mat. So make sure you get the correct battery for your rig. This one happens to be a group 48, which basically is what that shows on there. And then I crossed it over on O'Reilly and a few other parts websites, and it's definitely a group 48, so 760 cold cranking amp. But I want to show you guys underneath. I guess before we do that, if you need to remove your battery, the first thing you want to do is disconnect the negative, which is this side. 10mm nut, loosen that up. Be really careful with this sensor right here, because this is the BMS, the battery management system. That gives feedback to the engine computer, the ECU. Basically battery status, battery health, all kinds of stuff. So be really careful with that. If you do have to loosen this up, you definitely want to make sure that you don't let this turn, because it can break this right here. So you want to be real careful with that. I don't really see any reason why we would have to do that. I mean, unless you had to replace a cable maybe. But remove your negative first, and then on the positive, it's this nut, which is also 10mm here, and then you can take those off. This is the hold down, and it goes in there like so. You want to make sure that the correct side goes against the battery. So it's got, see, the battery's got a lip, so in that case we'd want this side to go in there. Some of them, they'll be angled in here and have little deals that this will fit into. So make sure you put that back in there correctly. But that's an 8mm head on that guy, and then that thing comes right out. Of course, keep the battery blanket, the heat shield there. You'll reuse that for the new one. So let's have a look underneath at the starter, and I'll show you what that looks like. Alright, so we're looking at the starter right there. I've already taken this little cap off. That's what gives you access to get the bolt out, to get the positive lead, this main positive, off of there. So on this, there's this ground wire right here. That's a 13 millimeter to get that off, and then it's also a 13 millimeter to get that positive lead off, and then this looks like a 10 for the ignition solenoid trigger wire, but I have not actually sized that yet. But what I want to do is I want to pull that starter out and have a look at it, because I think we got two things going on here. The way this thing cranks over really well when it's cold tells me that, like I said earlier, that the starter has an issue. And I mean, you can see the exhaust is right there. Not uncommon on a lot of vehicles, but there is a lot of heat, especially stop and go traffic and stuff like that. But so I really suspect two things here. That, of course, that battery's no good. It tested no good. And then I think we've got a starter issue as well. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this. Now, once we get the nut off and get this ground wire out of the way, then we've got the nut behind it that'll actually should pull that stud out of there. And then there'll be one, it looks like there's a bolt up higher up there to be able to get that starter all the way out. So here's what the starter looks like once you get that thing out. It has a little bit of play, but pretty normal. One of the points on these that can cause a problem is this wire right here. So battery cable comes in here, the trigger wire comes in here. So when you turn the key, or when the auto start enables, it'll put voltage onto this bolt right here. That closes your solenoid and then puts your 12 volt battery power onto this terminal, and then this goes in and goes into the brushes and spins your starter motor. So what can happen sometimes too is you can get corrosion underneath here. So sometimes just taking this nut off and cleaning that all up can actually fix an intermittent issue. So we can see that it's a factory original starter. So I'm going to take a look at that. I'll clean this terminal up, and I may even take the end cap off here and see what the brushes and stuff look like. See if the commutator and armature inside there, if they've been hot, if it looks like there's indications of burning or heat. And we'll make a decision if we're going to replace it or not. So guys, after a little bit of research, I tried using my power probe, which puts out about 10 amps. And then I used my power supply. It puts out about 13 amps. And I could not get it to pull the solenoid in. It wouldn't do it. So I did a little research, and on these starters it can take 15 to 20 amps. So I hooked up jumper cables to a battery, and I didn't have enough hands to be able to record that. And I just clipped the negative on here, made sure it had a good contact, and then touched the positive to this here, and it would arc. I knew I was getting good voltage, but I wouldn't get that solenoid to pull in. So definitely looking at getting a replacement starter. So here's what the inside of the starter looks like. It does look like it's gotten hot, and that's a little bit more unique brush wear than I've seen on a commutator before. Normally you see them nice and smooth, but it still doesn't look like Doesn't really look like anything got hot with the brushes and on this end, but it definitely looks like it's been hot over here. So we'll put this thing back together so we can turn it in as the core. Okay, here's our reman starter. It's all ready to go back in. And we've got our new battery. You should always try and put your new battery on charge if you have the opportunity. I mean, if you're stuck on the side of the road and you've got to buy a battery, then do what you got to do. But if you're changing a battery at your house, you should put it on charge before you put it in the vehicle. Some of these things sit on the shelf for a while. Now this one actually says April of 26, so it's just been manufactured, which is awesome. But we're still going to top it off while we put that starter in place. Now to give you guys a rundown real quick on the torque values, do that out from under the truck here. It's a little bit easier to show you. Alright, so for the small terminal here, that'll be 52 inch-pounds. For the large one, that's going to be 106 inch-pounds. When we bolt this thing in place, there's a stud that goes right here. The negative cable goes on there, and it gets torqued to 18 foot-pounds. And then these bolts, of course you'll do the bolt first, but the stud will go in there, and then the bolt will go in here. It comes in from that side. Those are torqued to 35 foot-pounds. So there's your torque values for your starter. Battery is now installed. Make sure I put a little bit of dielectric grease on the threads of this bolt, just because battery bolts tend to corrode. Snug that thing down. It goes onto a plastic block there, so don't over tighten that. And then the 10 millimeter here and the 10 millimeter on the negative, you just want to snug those down as well, just to make sure they're tight. You don't want to over tighten those or strip them or do any damage. Okay, so now we're at the point where we need to go and take our scan tool, and we need to reset the battery management system. Now we talked about, that's kind of what this does, monitors the battery. So I'm going to grab my code scanner and we'll do that. Alright, so I've got my iNova tablet set up here. We're going to go into Workshop Tools. And then we're going to go to Battery Reset. Battery Reset Procedure. And this is only used when the battery function's not been used after the battery's been replaced and the battery's been disconnected. So both of those are true, so continue.